for joining Ashley and me for another episode of Awkward Insurance. Ashley, are we having fun with season 5 yet?
I mean, I have fun every time I'm on a podcast with you.
With me or with our guests? Because I feel like I just tank the podcast every time.
Oh gosh, no. Obviously with our guests too, but anytime we're recording, we're having fun. Even when it's a serious subject and we might cry a little bit, we still bring it back to fun.
Awesome. Well, the Awkward Insurance team is working hard to bring forward topics that are commonly misunderstood by either insurance professionals or their clients and find ways to hold the conversations with informative intention. And we're always open to hearing your ideas and welcome you to join the Awkward Insurance Facebook group where you can share your thoughts, make suggestions, and interact with our community of insurance groupies and professionals to hopefully get the answers or maybe the support that you need. So, Ashley, let's go back to you for a second. You just finished IACon, right?
Yes, it was awesome.
How'd that go?
I mean, I'm biased, obviously, but I'm usually the one that comes out of an event saying, all right, here are the list of 5 things we could have done better. There's always room for improvement, but let me just tell you, everything went incredibly smooth. We've gotten such great feedback. We stayed on time. The vendor fair went really well. There were lots of people in there. It was all around a really great time and really great speakers.
I love it. I was watching it on Facebook, kind of getting a little FOMO that I wasn't there.
It was a good one. We missed you.
Oh, awesome. Well, I'm so excited about our season 5 and trying to debunk some of the weird stuff that goes on in the industry. The next 3 episodes, I think, are not only going to be informative, but timely. And I hope they'll help many understand maybe what's next in their careers or where their careers are going within the insurance industry. Some may think or say that the insurance industry is in a layoff crisis related to the state of our industry at the moment. And this topic is maybe one that strikes at the heart of job security, dreams and livelihoods. I mean, just imagine for a moment that your career, the one that you've devoted your life to, is suddenly hanging by a thread, and your steady paycheck that once provided for your family and offered a sense of stability now feels like it's slipping away. There's a harsh reality facing countless insurance professionals right now, which is why I'm so excited to have Mike Koscielny with us. We'll get to an introduction in just a little bit, but Mike, I messaged you around a month ago or so after the farmers layoffs that were announced. It seemed like everybody was shocked by them, even though farmers had kind of released a pre-announcement several months before that this was coming. And then all of a sudden it was everywhere and everybody was shocked, kind of thing, like maybe they didn't take it seriously or not, or something. But you had a post on LinkedIn that said, "Good thing there's life on the other side." So thanks so much for making that post. What's on your mind right now as we start a conversation about industry layoffs?
It's certainly, as you described it, Dustin, it's a very, very trying time. And I have to tell you, I know a lot of people who got laid off from farmers, not just farmers, but Foremost as well in Michigan. There was a number of people laid off there since they're affiliated. Foremost as part of the farmers family. But a lot of those people reached out to me immediately following that. I put a post on LinkedIn saying, hey, if anything I can do to help, I've got a pretty big network on LinkedIn, and I've had a number of people reach out to me, but it's difficult. I have a very close friend who's in Florida, and she got laid off, and she doesn't want to leave Florida. She has family there, has a mother and father she's caring for, and it's a struggle, I think, to find things. The other side of that, though, is I hear so much about all these open positions, and I go to a company website. I just looked at one recently. The company it came from, they had, I think, 12 postings on there. And I'd say more than half of them were remote. So while it's really, really trying times to be laid off, and I was laid off once years ago, job eliminated. It's, as my wife says, you have a time to have a pity party, but it's got to end. Like every party ends. And you got to start focusing how you're going to get back on your feet. What are you going to do? How are you going to sell yourself? And then more importantly, what's your network like? What can you reach out to help you find opportunities? Because they're out there. It might take a little bit of work to do it, but the jobs are there. I have a sense of that because I'm finding people who are getting placed now in other roles in the industry. And I think that's a plus.
Yeah. Ashley, how about you? I mean, you work for an industry association. Surely there's some scuttle coming either from your member base or within the association itself.
I think what I hear more of from within the association and the groups that we work with are we need staff. We're strapped for, we're so super understaffed at our agencies. Where can we hire people? It's more of like finding that new talent. It's not so much of, hey, I've been laid off. Can you help get me somewhere? And truthfully, we have to be a little bit mindful of that sometimes. It's different when, like with the farmers layoff and all of those people being laid off, that's a little bit different because it's not a direct competitor of our members. But sometimes if, somebody was laid off from an agency, we have to be mindful of trying to get them with another agency that might also be a member of our association. So we try to stay out of that, but we are definitely heavily focused on finding new talent and ways we can do that and get people trained to get them into the agencies that need them.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of it going on right now. You just take a look at social media and there's some current stir today.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if it's actually been officially announced, but there's a lot of commentary that's going on through social medias and even some kind of, I call them like behind the scenes Google pages, the ones that come after the first page of Google search. So that's kind of why I'm, just hearing you talk, Mike, that's kind of one reason why I'm happy that you're here to talk about that, especially hearing that you've been through a layoff before. So now the words, good thing there's life on the other side make a little bit more sense coming from you. So let me just give a little bit of an introduction. Mike is a national faculty member here at the National Alliance for Insurance Education and Research. He's worked in the insurance industry since the 70s and has extensive experience in underwriting. He's earned his CIC and CPCU designations and is the current director of field marketing at Olivet College. He is also now the proud CEO and founder of Born to Lead LLC, through which he's recently published a book called Born to Lead: Lessons in Leadership, which is available on his website and Amazon and currently sitting in my Amazon cart. So I think with that entire background, especially hearing that you've got 40 years of experience in the industry and you've been through a layoff, nobody's more qualified than you to have this conversation. So let's set the stage and talk about some recent layoffs that have made the headlines. We'll just start with farmers. And then, of course, you said foremost on top of that, the first thing, and I want to kind of go down the road of like, what's the reason? And there's a lot of that, because when the farmers thing hit, just like you, Mike, I got some phone calls or text messages or whatever, mostly from carrier side colleagues, not very much from independent agency side colleagues that were like, I'm afraid it's about to happen to me too. Do you know of anything? Keep your ear to the ground. What do you think? Especially some colleagues that have been in the industry for a while. Now they're starting to explore, the recent boom with insurtech. Is that an option for me? They might feel that that's not really the space for them because they're not as technically advanced, I suppose. But with farmers, the one thing that I thought of, and maybe I thought of this because I'm part of the old MetLife Auto and Home group, and I still have my rollover policy, if you will, is I was like, well, it's been a few years and they didn't do a whole lot of layoffs when they acquired MetLife. So to me, it kind of made a little sense that eventually there might be some reduction in their workforce as they, were no longer in the stage of trying to figure out what MetLife had and what their underwriters do or don't do or, whatever. So let's talk about that one for a minute. What do you think about the farmers layoff?
Yeah, I think that's one where if you dive onto page 2 of Google, you might find some more of the information because they struggled. I mean, they're in states that are very difficult to do business in. They made some pretty serious decisions like Geico did and some other sort of the national carriers to say, we're not going to do business in Florida. We're not going to do business in California because the regulatory environment, it makes it difficult for them to do that. Well, I don't fault them. I've been on that side of having to not be laid off myself, but to go through sort of a reduction in force. It's never fun, but it's sort of it has to be done under those circumstances in order to keep the organization viable. I think one of the biggest challenges is that oftentimes it's more senior people that get let go, and it's hard to find those sorts of jobs. I think you can find an entry-level job pretty much anywhere in our industry today with virtually any carrier. When I start to search to help people find things that are a bit more senior in the organization, then the pool gets much shallower and not nearly as big. So much of this is driven by sort of the corporate level of the organization, in my view, that looks at where they're at and says, we can't sustain the expense we have in order to continue to do business in places where it's been difficult. I mean, to me, Florida is a prime example of that. And I spent 9 years there working for a local domiciled company. And probably the last 2 or 3 years, I can't tell you how much business we got from everybody that went out of business. But I think some of that is a factor of certainly making bad decisions or not recognizing the decisions that really need to be made in those organizations. And the sad part is the senior managers do that, but the sort of the victims, if you will, the casualties of that are the people in the front line that are out there doing the work, right? They're interacting with the customers and agents and all those things that really sort of creates that sense of togetherness between the agency world and the carrier world. And now they're just cast off into the marketplace, unfortunately. And it's a struggle.
Mm.
Most recently, I talked to one very close friend that every offer she's got is significantly less. One was half what her salary was. And she's a very highly qualified person in sort of this process development area, both in the technical world, but also in just organizational world. And she's a hard person to place right now because there's not a lot of activity there. Will we come out of that? Who knows? But that's the reality of it. And I can tell you for myself, I was a senior level person that got job eliminated. I was a regional president of a fairly large insurance company at the time. There aren't a lot of regional president jobs out there. Fortunately for me, it took me about 6 months to find an opportunity, but that's not the case today for a lot of people. I don't want to pass all the blame on the carriers' leadership. Certainly, they have some responsibility in that, but the regulations that are affecting our industry today affect everybody, not just the companies, but the agents as well. The availability of marketplace, certainly, and pricing. I mean, you talk about pricing in Florida. It's ridiculous where it is right now.
Yeah.
And it's a function of a lot of things that aren't just so readily apparent to the consumer.
Yeah. You brought up Florida and California. I think New York is another one that when you hear of layoffs, if you dive into it deep enough and you see where they're making those cuts, it's Florida, California, New York. Of course, it's happening all across the United States. And the one that's, spiraling the drain right now is actually there's a lot of people in North Ireland and India that are the ones that are kicking up the storm on that one right now. But one thing that I thought to think about, and Ashley, as you said, that you hear a lot more, especially from the independent agent side, that we're understaffed. We need more people. We need help training. And then it seems like from the company side, the larger corporation side, that's where the layoffs happen. And, the one thing that I've always heard, and I think we still hear, and it's probably come out of all three of our mouths, whether or not it's true or you believe it or whatever, is that we say that the insurance industry is one of the most stable industries to work in. And it's weathered many storms, that particular phrase has. And if we're being honest with ourselves, is that true? Do you still feel like that's true, Mike? Is the industry still one of the best to work in terms of being stable and being able to weather economic variances?
Yeah, I guess I think about that in terms of there's always been not opportunities, but situations where we've had reductions in force, always. I think about the last one I was personally involved with at a company in Ohio where we were struggling financially and we had to make some really hard decisions. And the process is within an organization is very, very precise, and it's monitored by human resources so that we don't do anything that would find ourselves in a court of law trying to deal with a wrongful termination. But that's the reality, I think. I think it's much more when it's 2,500 employees, it's one thing. When an organization I work with that had 1,500 and we laid off 50, nobody pays attention to that, but that's still 50 people that are put on the marketplace. And I can tell you, as the leader of a group that I had to do that with, that's the worst thing in the world to tell somebody they don't have a job anymore and then walk them out the front door. It's just, I mean, I cried after that. Not in the office. I waited till I get home, but these are people that I work with every day, and now they're not part of our organization. All the outplace services that are offered by carriers are wonderful, but most people struggle with that, I think, ultimately. The reality is everyone, I would tell you everybody who's in the personal lines marketplace is struggling right now.
Gosh.
With few exceptions. I really believe that. Because auto is a problem. We've sort of stripped the pricing down so low that the margin to make money is so small right now. Sometimes it's not sustainable.
Oh my gosh.
The only upside is interest rates are
Yeah,
up.
right. I actually just saw, oh my gosh, you just triggered me twice.
Sorry.
I actually just saw a post from a friend on Facebook the other day where she said the prices of auto insurance are so ridiculous. I'm thinking about just not even having a car. And then one of her friends underneath that posted, I know, right? My insurance is $240. And she said per month. She's like, no, 6 months. I about fell out of my chair. I'm like, number one, that's concerning because that's way too low.
And she probably has
Way low.
full coverage, quote unquote,
Yes,
Right.
thank you.
coverage.
Good old 1530,
right.
right?
But that person also said, well, that's because we're in Florida in a no fault state. And mine's $240 every 6 months. It's ridiculous. I'm like, okay, I don't think all right, Dustin, walk away.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's a battle that you do not want to fight because you're not going to win it and you're just going to be headbutting the wall.
All right.
You know, it's crazy. So I moved from there back, and I was paying $4,000 a year for property insurance in Florida. Not an extravagant home by any stretch. I moved back here. I have a smaller home, and I'm paying the same amount of money in the state of Illinois. And
Yeah.
I'm thinking, okay, there's no hurricanes here. Yeah, we get tornadoes every once in a while, but how did the rate get to be this almost the same as it is in Florida?
Yeah.
I'm so glad you said that because I was an agent for 10 years. I dealt with Allstate and Travelers and Erie and all different companies in Pennsylvania that I feel like a lot of our agents here talk about. But I am very aware. I was always the person that sold quality over price. You know, I was, so you don't have to tell me what's a good policy and what I should have. And I don't worry about the price. But what I will say is that when we just bought a house a month ago and I went with Erie and I had my friend writing the policy for me, I go, I cannot believe I'm going to say these words after being in the industry for so long. I'm like, I cannot believe my price is so high. But then I forgot that our personal articles floater, like that we have with Travelers, when you go with Erie, they put it on the homeowners. So once I took that out, I'm like, all right, now we're talking. But I'm like, man, this price
Not so
like,
bad. Yeah.
I was surprised, and that takes a lot to surprise me. So rates are all over the board now.
Absolutely.
I didn't mean to trigger you, Dustin, but the value of interest rates being up in terms of investing is good for companies because now there was a time in the 80s we had this cash flow underwriting approach to this business where when interest rates are 13 and 14%, the carrier would say, well, I can lose 8. Well, I can write my business at 100%, 108 combined and still make money. Well, that dried up, as we all know, because our 401ks have not been increasing significantly because of investment interest rates. But now we're starting to see that again. And I'm hoping this might be able to sort of drag this industry out of the doldrums that it's in right now, because it just seems like we battle every day on the carrier side to be as profitable as we possibly can, or at least reduce our losses. And we're challenged by not just the marketplace, but the regulators and everybody else that says, well, that's way too much. You can't take 5 or you can't take 10, but I'll give you 7. Well, you're already at a deficit there. And so having a more viable investment market, I think it's going to help carriers sort of crawl out of this problem.
Well, I hope something can help us crawl out of this problem or pull us out of this problem or whatever. Yeah, I want to take it back just a second. You started going down kind of a conversation. I don't know if you realized it about like indicators of layoffs. I think that's one thing that causes those text messages and those phone calls to come through. When a moratorium hits or no business or no new business is allowed in the
That's
state
a bad
or
sign.
maybe nation. Nope. What are other things that you can think of in your 40 plus year experience that seem to be telltale markers of whether or not somebody could introspectively go, am I next? Is my company next? Should I start doing something to wall myself off or protect myself? What are some indicators, do you think?
I think as long as there's open communication from the senior leadership of companies to say, this is our financial status, this is where we're at. If they're doing that, which some are better at it than others, I'll admit, I've worked for 5 different carriers in my career. A couple of them weren't very good. Fortunately, I had enough people in high places I could find out really what was going on. But those are the things I would, if you've got a runaway expense ratio, or they're talking about they can't get enough rate, or we got a big challenge in this business today. We have all this office space and no one's in it. And these are dollars they're still spending for nothing. They're not getting any value out of it. And then there's some offset to that. Yeah, they're working from home, but that's an increased expense because now we have to provide them technology so they can do their job that wasn't necessarily in the office. So I think I guess when I think about it, I say that sort of examine the financial status of the company on a regular basis. Typically, most carriers will talk about it quarterly. I think the other thing to do is to talk to your agents and listen to the drum beats that are in the marketplace. When you're like $400 and or $248 in Florida for auto insurance, there's something going on there that isn't right. And I will tell you, that never is sustainable. That's going to collapse. And so if you're there, I don't mean to pick on anybody, but there's a particular company in Florida that wrote everything, and they had a great rate, and they expanded into Louisiana. I won't say their name, but and then they had a huge layoff, and they cut loose a ton of business.
Mm.
And when you start to see that, that's the writing on the wall, I believe, because technology is not replacing people. I'm sorry, it's not. Maybe some very low level positions in an organization, but the technology is not replacing underwriters. We've already been through that, right? The systems
Hmm.
do a lot. So it's not technology. Everybody's fearful of that. What's AI going to do? Machine learning. Um, it's only as good as the people you have, and they still can't make the more complex decisions. It'll take a long time to do that. So those are the things I would focus my time on. I'd have really serious conversations with my leadership, the people I report to, and say, "What's my future?" And then just keep your toe in the pool all the time. I mean, I would tell you through my 40 years, I had probably four recruiters that were friends. And I would get phone calls. Hey, they're looking for somebody here. You want to go there? I turned Florida down 6 times before I actually moved there because I was
They
afraid
wore
to
you
move
down.
there. Yeah, a guy in his 50s moving to Florida and then they're going to go belly up. I mean, what would I do? I'd sell t-shirts on the beach, I guess, or something. But keep your toe in the pool. Make sure you got a solid network. So, I mean, I use LinkedIn for that. I think it's a great resource. I guess be at the ready, you know, keep your head on a swivel. You just never know who is next. I would have never thought farmers personally until it happened. I was kind of shocked by it, but I think there's some out there that in Florida, I think there's a whole bunch of companies that I think there's people are watching. Say, what are they next? you know, I guess if you really wanted to do something, go work for the state-run insurance company because at least they're going to continue to pay you because you're getting money like Citizens or whoever, right?
Oh gosh.
The fair plans, or because they're always going to be around.
Right. Well, especially right now with the market that we have
Yeah,
going on right now. As you're talking, you're literally spilling out all of the kind of consequences of layoffs. You started talking about well, you said that you were at a company for 20 years or so and they turned direction. I don't know if that was because they started, laying off or reducing their workforce or whatever, but when companies do that, the employees that have been there for a long time start questioning their position there and may decide it's time to go. When that happens, you lose history within the company, you lose knowledge within the company, and it takes a while to rebuild that. So layoffs aren't done lightly, I don't think. I think they do everything that they can to avoid it. They're not trying to be monsters. I don't think. But looking ahead, what do you see as the future of the industry right now? Maybe how will it impact workforce dynamics?
I think the industry. I jokingly say I've been to do it for 44 years. The most significant thing that affected the personal lines marketplace was insurance score. Certainly technology and certainly artificial intelligence, but that dramatically changed the business. You can say good or bad to that, but that was a dramatic change. I would say there's a lot more focus on some other aspects of the business in terms of the technology. I don't know if you know, but if you own a GM, they're collecting 600 different data elements every 30 seconds on your car when you're driving it. Where's all that going to go? I mean, that's information that would certainly benefit the carrier, how you drive, because now it's not a function of, geez, I'm a 16-year-old male, and that's my first driver's license, and I'm probably going to be a problem, which our history has always said that. But more so, what are the driving habits? How do I drive? Because not every 16-year-old drives like a crazy person, like I did, drag racing down the street. I think
We
that's the
won't
piece
mention
of
my
this.
driving history.
Mine's
my
great.
mom would my mom would have some stories.
I got my second speeding ticket with my mom in the passenger seat, so you can imagine
Oh
what
my
that
God.
conversation was like on the way home. But I think that you have to embrace this as well at the same time it's happening, but just recognize that we're a long way from dramatically changing the workflows. I'm not surprised when you see this sort of the ripple effect, and you mentioned this earlier, Dustin, is what's happening in India and Ireland right now is the ripple effect, what's happening in our business today. Because those
Mm.
call centers that are in India or the Philippines are serving the business and people like farmers. Like most everybody has some offshore
Yeah.
customer service, right? So that's the ripple effect of what happens there. I think as I think about it just for myself, always did my best to make sure that I was as valuable to the organization that I could possibly be, which means insurance education, be engaged, have quality numbers, be engaged in the organization, not necessarily everything, but not only the workforce, but be involved in the organization outside of work, right? So are you an active volunteer to the point where it's almost like, well, we can't get rid of Mike. Look at all he does. He's so
Yeah.
deeply involved in our company.
So flying under the radar is not a technique of
The
securing
best
you.
thing to do, yeah. When every time we do a riff, the first thing we look at is performance. So we go through the whole list of people, top to bottom, and the ones at the bottom, unless there's some other redeeming characteristic they might have, that's going to be the big driver. So if you perform well anywhere, agency, company, it's hard to be eliminated. It's hard for them to do that because they recognize that the load that you carry for that organization. You have to prove your value. Then you may probably survive. Will the business change dramatically? Who knows? The wild card is all this technology stuff. We're doing much, much more with using outside sources to monitor the kind of work we do. But then on the other side of that, I see the industry moving from driving the car, looking in the rear view mirror, like we've done for the history of insurance, and now start to look out the windshield and try to figure out how can we prevent losses? How can we make Florida more insurable so that rates come down? How can we eliminate water claims on homeowners or commercial business policies? Because it's one of the driving forces on our business is plumbing losses. So how can we solve those problems for the consumer? Because face it, nobody wants a claim. It's the most disruptive thing that ever happens to you with it. It's your car, your house, or your business. And so companies have to start thinking about this in terms of the policyholders are our partners in this. How do we help them keep their properties, their business, their cars, their commercial autos insurable? To protect the insurability, that's always been the key. When I was an agent years ago, we talked about all the time. Protect your insurability. I think that's an important part of that. That's how we would evolve as an industry, is to take this stance of not be the source of all of the anguish from policyholders because they pay so much, and say, hey, they really helped me out. They installed a water shutoff valve in my house, and now when the pipe's leaking, I don't have total destruction. I don't have 6 inches of water in my first floor. It's a better place to be because no one wants claims. If that happens, then everything gets much better in the long term.
Yeah. You've given a lot of knowledge in here about what type of skills you need to keep your thumb on, how you need to build your network in terms of making sure that you'll survive an economic swing or a job force fluctuation, that kind of thing. You've talked about, education, being involved in your organization, a lot of tips that you've thrown in here about all of that. Through all of this, I'm going to call you out here for a second, Ashley. Through all of this, Ashley sent me a text message and said, I really like this guy. Ashley, what made you send that text message to me? What is so likable about Mike is it the reassuring, there is another side to this layoff thing. What's going on in your head, Ash?
Yeah, I mean, I think that sometimes, well, I know that sometimes we're allowed to.
Dang it!
No, because I just didn't want to say a bad word. I mean, sometimes you get people on here talking about, like, not on here, but on podcasts, talking about, like, oh yeah, it's fine, you'll figure it out, and like, you can't bullshit a bullshitter. Sometimes you really just can't figure it out. And everything that he said is just, it's so true. Like, that there is a positive side to it, and I love the fact that you said one company that you worked for just totally, pivoted and changed, and you're like, this is no longer a place for me. And I think, a lot of people don't have the guts to do that. And when it's no longer, I don't want to say benefiting you, when you no longer feel like it's the right place for you to be, you need to walk away and take
Yeah.
that risk, because you could be hurting yourself and hurting the company even more if you stay there and just try to put up with it. And, quality of life, I just think that I think everything that you're saying is spot on, and that people should listen to this and not be fearsome if there's going to be layoffs. Easy for me to say because I'm not being laid off, but also if I were going to be laid off, I would feel more comfortable after speaking with you. So I'm going to go and add you on LinkedIn.
I'm just saying, if you had a great network, that could really change your life. There's no question. When I left that company, it was a philosophical difference. They were a kind of company that fit with me philosophically. They completely shifted. I would have battles with the senior vice president there. I was training the insurance industry's underwriters, and after 3 or 5 years, they'd leave and go work for somebody else. And it was for nothing. It was for $5,000. It costs more than $5,000 to go through the hiring process. And I laid the whole thing out, but no, we're not. We pay at market, mid-market, maybe a little above. And I just couldn't do it anymore. I could not stand in front of my team and say, this is rah-rah, this is a great company, when their peers were leaving for virtually nothing, right? Relatively speaking, the time period, $5,000 was not significant. But I think that's the part of this, that I try to engage a lot of young people in our industry to say, don't give up. I spent 44 years. I'm blessed that I got that opportunity, and I'm not the smartest guy in the room by any stretch of the imagination. I work for a lot of smart people, but I see things, I think, sometimes very clearly. And when it gets to that point, networks and a network of recruiters that have your best interest involved, that can really help you if you're getting to that place where it's like, oh, this is not looking good for me. A lot of people are nervous of making the jump, right? It takes courage to do that. Even if things are good, to go find another opportunity, because you're starting all over. You got new friends, new work. Is it going to be exactly what I wanted? Those are all debates. I find it interesting that
it's middle school all over again.
Exactly, yeah. So I got to earn your stripes, right? No, I talked to a lot of millennials who, they've jumped every year or two, and it's like they've gotten so used to it that they go in knowing no one in a short period of time. They have to build up what took me 40 years to build up, cred, my street cred in a company.
Your street cred.
Yeah. I have a friend who always says to me, Mike, your network is your net worth. And I think about that a lot when
oh my gosh,
people come to me. I think it's a really
Is that in your new book?
I didn't put it in the book, but I just wrote an article where I put that in there. So
we've had a lot of information shared in this one. I've got one last question. We've talked about everything that layoffs are. Give us one or two, something that'll help reduce the fear and anxiety. What layoffs aren't?
Well, I guess, like I said, you said it earlier. It's not the end of the world. It's oftentimes it opens the doors to something very good. When I left that company, I found the second job, my second job. It ended up in a very short period of time. I was a regional president, and then I got job eliminated. So I got crushed like in 3 years from that. And I mentioned, everybody needs to have a pity party. There's nothing wrong with that. Just like my wife says, every party has to come to an end. But the reality of that was I had opportunities that came because of that opened doors for me that I never thought I would be doing. I went to a company and I was the lead for an implementation of an entirely new policy admin system. Never did that before. It was a fascinating opportunity, and that opened up more doors. So you find yourself in a bad place and you think it's the end, but it's really, people say when a door closes, there's an open window somewhere. So jump through.